Okay, hello everyone, and welcome, welcome. It's good to see all your faces. It's August 22nd, and our topic for tonight is immigration. But we're going to start with our icebreaker, and part of the reason is of starting with an icebreaker is just to kind of um start with a calm, non-controversial, no wrong answer kind of a kind of a thing to just sort of help us stay help us get to know each other a little better and just start from a nice friendly place. So my name is Carol, and I'm coming at you from Taos, New Mexico. My pronouns are she, her. And our icebreaker question tonight um, is pretty basic. Just what's your go-to kind of music to listen to? I've asked before what kind of music calms people down, but I never just said what kind of music do you like? So I guess my favorite kind of music is like classic blues, but
Wow.
it's kind of hard to find that. If you put that in your search, you get more modern stuff. And it's hard to find that without just creating your own playlist. So if I'm just turning on the radio or something, I'm looking for like folk or country, something like that. Um, why don't Lynn, you've been on screen in the waiting the longest. Why don't you go next?
Okay, so I'm Lynn and she, her, and I'm coming to you from LaPorte, Texas, which is 25 miles outside downtown Houston. Um, and I have two favorites actually. I love jazz, smooth contemporary jazz, instrumental, and I love blues, classic blues, the old school blues. Um, yeah, as a matter of fact, today is John Lee Hooker's birthday. Um, and he was a classic blues man in the sense of everything. I realized that I have a history today in history. So yeah, classic blues and instrumental jazz.
Oh, nice. Okay. How about Craig? Not Craig or Craig.
Mm. It's funny. I've had so many nicknames throughout the years, and one of them was Kreger. So whenever you say that, my ears perk up, and I'm like, okay, no, it's not me. Different one. So Craig Puckett, he, him, but I don't really care if you call me he or they. It doesn't matter to me. Um, Favorite music? I don't know. I listen to so many different things. When I was younger, it was in the 80s, it was like 80s pop on the radio. So a lot of Michael Jackson, Madonna. Um, then in my teenage years in the 90s, it would have been like 90s country, 90s R&B, 90s alternative rock. I think that was like a really great era for music. Um, since then, indie rock, top 40 pop, um, even stuff that I didn't like when I was a kid, which would have been like smooth jazz, I now enjoy in my past 40 years. It's nice and calming and relaxing. And before I would have been, what's this boring music? And now I'm like, oh, this is nice and soothing. So yeah, I kind of like a little bit of almost everything.
Nice.
Yeah.
Adrian?
Hello, my name is Adrian, he, him, and well, my favorite type of music, although I listen just a lot of stuff, I think if you were to ask my friends what's my go to, they'll probably end up saying something musical theater.
Mm.
I always like my musicals, I like hearing it, and I think it all depends what vibe you're in because musicals just kind of have a bit of a range of everything. If you want something upbeat, you can basically get yourself something from Hairspray of You Can Stop the Beat. If you want something soft and like something that really speaks to your soul, you can always end up going with one of those big ballads from Dreamgirls or even on the newer stuff. And every song, especially if you know the story, has such a big meaning. And then you start looking into the lyrics as to exactly what that character is going through and why they're singing. And there's this um, line that I've heard as a quote from these composers, but it was basically when writing for musical theater is that when the feeling when words are just can express enough, you start to sing, and then when singing cannot express enough, you dance. And I feel like sometimes that's what musical theater is about, to be able to express what sometimes words just cannot do by themselves.
So sometimes I watch a lot of different churches online sometimes when I get a chance. And the church in New York does uses a lot of musicals in their Sunday morning services. Occasionally Sunshine Cathedral in Florida does too. But that's really an interesting take on it. I like how you know the background of all of those. That's a beautiful way to think about it. All right, Kreger.
My name is Kreger, he, they, Austin, Texas. And my go-to music, I love to listen to music when I'm walking or riding my bicycle because I'm killing two birds with one stone, because the music I'm listening to is the music that I'm going to be playing drums on or singing with the choir at church. And Adrian would really be down with our Bible on Broadway series that we do every July. And this July was especially challenging. I'd never heard of any of the musicals that we did. We did Tuck's Everlasting. We did Jekyll and Hyde, which that was famous. Little Women, I knew about the book, but I'd never heard, the musical. And I forgot the last one. So I've constantly got songs that I need to learn going through my head. Sometimes I'm listening for the tenor part. Sometimes I'm listening for the drum part. And if I'm just doing my own thing, then I just put on Apple pop hits and just see what hits me. And wow, there's a lot of wild stuff out there today for an old man like me.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice. I didn't realize the church did that in July. That's I guess I didn't recognize any of the musicals either. Okay. Well, we're going to talk about immigration tonight, and there's a lot of different angles that we could come at this from. It's a big subject. Let's just start with what in your heart, what do you think the church how should we approach it from a faith perspective? What are verses that come to mind when you think about how immigration and how you decide where to throw your hat in the ring on the subject?
Well, the very first thing that pops into my mind would basically be the Christmas story, how Jesus was born, Joseph and Mary going to a different country, asking for help, and nobody had room, and so they had to go to a stable. And so that's to me that's a pretty big immigration story in one way.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a beautiful way to put it. There is a verse, and I don't recall which one, but um, I I think that we are called to be um, good to the foreigner. There is a one scripture in particular. I don't remember which book it's in, but I remember um, that we are called to be kind to foreigners, and that's the one that always jumps out at me, especially with all we're hearing about immigration in the country now. We're called as Christians to be nice to them, to love them, to accept them. So
Yeah, and that was a very big theme throughout the Hebrew scriptures. Just it was, and I think life was just in such a way back then that it just would have been so hard to survive without the kindness of strangers. So
right.
everybody wanted to know it in order to be able to travel around. That's how people were meant to survive. And it seems like the whole story of Sodom and Gomorrah was more about the sin of inhospitality
Mm.
than
Yeah.
what it's been said to be about. So
Mm.
yeah, that's the one I was thinking of too. So those are both good, really good examples. So how did we get to where immigration is such a political issue, and especially the far right, which is so identified as being quote Christian? How did we get so polarized in this country?
I mean, there is that saying of if Jesus were around today, Christians would hate him. I mean, I don't know how the history of how we got here is a kind of a long and fraught one. The weaponization and politicization of religion and how it's uh, especially how Christianity has come to symbolize some things that are very opposite and antithetical to its own nature. So I don't know how we got here. There's a lot of steps along that path, but I think the messaging is pretty explicit. I mean, I was pulling up the passage as you were asking that question, and there's a number of passages, but the one in particular, kind of a touchy book from Leviticus, um, says Leviticus chapter 19, verse 34, the alien who resides with you shall be to you as citizens among you. You shall love the foreigner as yourself,
Right.
for you are foreigners in the land of Egypt. I
Right.
am the Lord your God.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know how
Thank you
you could
for
take
that.
that any differently.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That's exactly the one that I was thinking of. You must love them as you love yourself. Yeah.
Um, Part of me was thinking about how it got politicized. I think there is a saying of the "not in my backyard." And that's kind of like infrastructure, like bridges or new power plants and things that could go, but people don't want it in their backyard because they can see them, and to them it's an eyesore. And so maybe I think as more immigration has come up here, people were happy, and now that they're more prominent, or maybe they're rising and now it's actually a whole culture and people are seeing, it's like, oh, it's in my backyard, I don't want it to be in my backyard. And that's when I think I start going in there. And you know, part of, as an immigrant myself, I was born in Monterrey, Mexico, and then migrated to the United States when I was 9 years old. Up to this date, sometimes I come and stop and think, what do people think about like me coming here? Do somebody at work thinks I actually came and stole a job, or that I shouldn't even be here as well? So, and those are things that just every day, it just happens. Try not to think much about it, but no, you see it out there in the news and people with opinions. So of course you gotta stop and think, uh, just because of the color of my skin as well, people might think of my accent, will probably think of something as well.
Well,
That's
yeah, I think unfortunately when 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 President 45 came down the escalator, one of the first things that he talked about immigrants, and he said things like they're not sending their best people, and he's made comments um, um, derogatory comments about immigrants since he first started running for president. And he has continued those to the demonization of immigrants for the last 8 years. He referred to African countries as S-hole countries. So anybody who wasn't from America, they're even talking about um, people who are born, like what they call them, anchor babies. So like people from another country come to the United States and have a baby. Well, if you're born in the United States, then you're a United States citizen, okay? And but there's a derogatory term calling them anchor babies, that people come to America to have their child, just to have their child, so that they can have U.S. citizenship, and how they might change that or something. Which is totally ridiculous, because everybody in America is an immigrant. The Native Americans were here first, and Africans were brought here in 1619. So nobody, the Italians, and what is it, the in New York on the Statue of Liberty, send me your tired, your poor, whatever that is. People have come for generations to this country. And if you go back, and I actually looked this up because I was having a conversation with a friend of mine about immigration. You can go all the way back there. We've always had immigration. This is not new. This is not something that just started 4 years ago or 8 years ago or 12 years ago.
Right, and it wasn't always like, for example, I think it was like the 1950s when it wasn't just that borders were more open, or I think you could classify them as completely open, and there were advertisements.
Right.
The U.S. was saying, please come, we need, we want cheap labor.
Thank
They
you.
want people to do the kind of jobs they didn't want to do. And
Right.
so they're like, please come, we need you,
Right.
and that was particularly in the Southwest, in Texas, and all the way
Yes.
across to California.
I just cut and pasted. Good evening, everybody. I'm late and I apologize. And so I just posted in the chat the what's on the Statue of Liberty, and it says,
Thank you.
give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free.
Right.
Wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest tossed, to me. I
Yes.
lift my lamp beside the golden door.
Yeah, thank you. That's exactly. I couldn't, it's been a long time since I took a civics class, but I know that it was there. That's what I
I
was
don't think anybody knows it by heart, but we know what it says.
right.
Yeah, everybody knows the first part. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how can we deny that?
Yes,
We're
that's
not America if we do. I mean,
everybody wants to claim it for themselves, and
yeah,
people.
yeah.
I had got in a debate with a woman that I usually talk to at the swimming pool, and I thought the argument was so circular. It was just like, I mean, she was saying, my grandparents had to wait like 6 years before they could get a social security card or something like that. And I was like, wow, that's so what are you thinking, that people are just getting them immediately now? I
Right.
don't think that's the case with immigration. In fact, let me see if I have the paper here. No, but I have a friend here who works with the Taos Immigrant Coalition, and she has just told me some really hard stories about how people are getting along. But she gave me this big paper of how somebody who immigrates to this country gets citizenship, and it just, I mean, the long paths and the possible no's and everything. It was so complicated and so um uh so impossible. It's just so hard to get a green card and so hard. And then it's suspected once you get a green card, then it's like oftentimes many years, 6 years to 12 years to get to citizenship even after that. If you and I mean it's just incredibly hard. It's not like
Yes.
Uh,
um
I can tell you how the process for at least for me was. My mom, as a child, and my whole family, they were migrant workers to California, so they already had their resident cards. When we migrated to the United States, she applied to become a citizen because she already was a resident. So she got that within a year. A year later, she got. So that was expedited. This was with Bill Clinton in 1995. So he had like a plan to make residents into citizens. So once she did that, she was able to claim my dad, her husband, and my brother and myself as to become residents of the United States. So that was in 1996. It took 4 years before we got our residency cards. And then after we became residents of the United States, we were able to apply for citizenship, which took another 4 years. So that's 8 years to be able
Mm-hmm.
to go from just
Mm-hmm.
migrating to a
Mm-hmm.
citizen and technically having a parent claiming their child, a minor, because I was still under 18. That's basically the fastest route.
Wow.
And back then that was 8 years. So
Wow.
it can take longer than that.
yes, I'm sure it's quite a bit longer. And I know it is quite a
It
bit
is
longer.
now. Yeah. I mean, make no mistake, the immigration system is broken.
It is very
Um, it is broken and it needs to be fixed, no doubt about that. But two things come to mind for me. The president, whoever he or she is, has no control over people fleeing countries, coming to America for a better life. Because I believe that that is why people come. We're the what Reagan says, city on the hill, shining star, whatever. People come to America because there's opportunity and there's jobs and
yes, but there are things that influence it. And I think some of the things that happened um not to well, I guess I don't know how to say this without pointing fingers, but some of the things that happened during the Reagan administration in South America are are still influencing the amount of immigration and the cartels and everything. So one
right.
thing, I mean, there are some ways the president can influence it, and pardon me for not having all the facts for this, but I was told, I think it was by that same friend, um, that there was a country, I think it was El Salvador, that has just been in this administration, and I think Kamala was instrumental in this. They made enough inroads in that country in terms of creating jobs in controlling the cartels and things that people were not fleeing as much, and that has influenced the decrease from that country more than almost anything. And the statistics do show a decrease in a lot of the South American countries lately, except for Venezuela. Um, uh, I think there's been an increase there, and I don't know I don't know anything about the situation. But another thing I want to try to debunk some of the things that we hear politically, and and another thing that you always hear, um, and that this woman that the swimming pool woman brought up to me again was just what about the drugs? What about the cartels? And I think it's really, really clear, if you look at it politically and economically, that the more you stop immigration, the more you try to ban it, the more you do stupid things like put up walls or, ineffective um, and expensive things like that, that really helps the cartels. It's my understanding that that almost all, like more than 90% of uh, almost 100% of the people that are crossing the border without papers are coming with the help of the cartels. They're coming through coyotes, and that are all controlled by the cartels. And the cartels are oftentimes fight amongst each other. If one leader dies, then all the other ones are fighting to take leadership. And so nobody's, even though you hear about people like getting all the way across Mexico from South American countries or from South Mexico, things like that, they're usually going through several cartels. They're not going to get there without the protection of the cartels. And so the cartels are making big money. The cartels are not stopped by laws or walls or anything like that. They're making billions now because we're just driving this business to them.
Well,
So
there's another side of that story, and I mean, if the demand for illegal drugs wasn't high, then the cartels would have no way to sell. And that's different too, because um, what do our drug laws say? Will we ever stop thinking about addiction as a crime versus an
right,
illness? So
right. Yes,
there's
and
that whole other thing. That's a whole nother topic. I'm sorry, but yeah.
yeah, and we should
Mm.
talk about the injustice of our prison systems and things like that as well. But that's, like you said, that's another subject. So one of the my friend sent me a connection to a video from a woman who works with a group called Samaritans, and she gave a talk in May at a UU church in Santa Fe. So like I said, it was in May, so this is not something like way in the past. This is she this group called the Samaritans and several other groups. I think one was called the Humanitarians, and I can't remember the other group, but they work to help people at the border. And they were doing things like they were some of the first groups to start doing things like leaving water and and food and things in the desert when people were dying so frequently trying to cross the desert. And I mean, they still are, people still are, but the situation is just different. But those kind of things are very legal. It's not like you're defying the law if you help people in those kind of ways. But some of the just horrible things that they've seen.
So how do we connect with somebody like the Samaritan group and find out more about what they do and how they do it? And, maybe there's a way we can help support them, or because I personally, I just don't know what to do. I don't know where I can make a
Definitely think
difference.
there are groups like that can help. When I lived in Las Cruces, the church that I went to, who became kind of a, like they allowed us to have a nest, an MCC nesting church within their walls and under their guidance and protection. But they did a lot of things for justice. It was a First Christian Church, which was UU and I mean not UU, Disciples of Christ, and it was two denominations. I can't remember. Anyway, they did a lot of things like the protest and stuff, but they also tried to find that there was a time then when our church wasn't a good place for a sanctuary just because they didn't have like showers and enough bathrooms and you know things like that to help. But once someone has been detained, then you could volunteer your house for the time period between when they when they were like sent to New York or wherever. But anyway, I will try to find some more information and maybe I can share that by email. I think there are lots of groups, and I'm sure that Bob Stubblefield and the Justice Committee can also help us connect in some ways. But there are some good groups that are boots on the ground. They're the ones who first helped like set up some camps and things, and they had some pretty scary stories too. One of the things that she said about Border Patrol, they would oftentimes have to get Border Patrol just to come in just for safety. Like we know this person is in danger, they're dying in the desert, go get them. And sometimes they would and sometimes they wouldn't.
So what would happen once they got them? Is
Well, that they would be detained.
deported?
Yeah, they're always detained. That there's a they're mostly nonprofit groups, or they may be an offshoot of some other group, like just say, for instance, Catholic Charities or something like that. But they're always detained because they have to be detained until they have their hearing. And that's partly where the system is broken, because getting a hearing can take such a long time. And the question is then, what do you do with these families or these people or these children even, who maybe some of them may be traveling alone?
Yes,
What
she
do you
said
do
that
with them?
she said they would a lot of times she showed a picture of just a 5-year-old who was
Right,
trapped by herself
right.
up with
Yeah.
family. I mean, and I'm sure that was a very desperate situation for that family.
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
sure that even as scary as that is, I'm sure it was the safest alternative they could find.
Right.
She also said that she found out from the Border Patrol, they heard multiple people from the Border Patrol saying that if they ever shot someone across the fence, that they were to tell a story that person was throwing rocks at them.
Oh, wow.
And so she showed a picture of a man who was shot 12 times in the back, and who was clearly not doing anything. He was shot from the US side of the wall, shot on the Mexico side. Just ridiculous mistreatment. I remember living in Las Cruces, just driving down the highway, and I was just like, what is that over there? Is that a school? I would just see all these young kids going in and out of these buildings, and I didn't see like any adults around or anything, and somebody was finally like, well, that's just the cages where the kids are kept. And I was just like, oh my gosh, that was even before you started hearing all that about family separation.
Right.
And I just saw that. But I also, just my experience with working there, I'm an OB-GYN, and I remember just like people just like people coming in the orange suits and the shackles and coming in to get like their prenatal care visit. And I remember just remarking to a staff member, oh, I wonder what they did to be in jail like that and all of that. And they're like, well, I'm sure they were just undocumented. And I was like, what? I mean, and how much
Just
money,
because they came across
how
the
much money
border?
does that take to
Yeah,
detain somebody and do all of that? And and where is that money going? It's certainly not
yeah,
going to our government. It's going in
right,
pockets.
right.
And also what you said about the anchor babies, I just have to say
Yeah,
about we would frequently see women who like their water would break in Mexico, and then they would like get on a bus and drive
yeah.
like and be on this public bus for like hours and hours while they're having contractions. And I would just, those
Oh,
were some of the toughest, the most beautiful women and the deliveries that I've ever seen. It was just
wow.
it was just it was just amazing. And so so women coming here to they you make it they make it the other side makes it sound like it's just
Right,
an easy
right,
thing to do,
right. It's
but it is
not
not. It's just that, I mean, such a beautiful sign of a woman doing something to give her child
a better life,
yeah, yeah.
more opportunity. Yeah, that is the rock in the hard place, I guess. It's like maybe the border patrol or people on this side don't see that they're coming here not to commit crimes, not to commit murders, but they're coming here because they want a better life.
Yeah, and
Because
I think
America is the country that it is.
the statistics are skewed too, because I mean, if you get deported, isn't I mean, if you get caught like that and deported, isn't that in some cases a felony? So when
Thought
they're
it was a
saying
misdemeanor.
that when they're saying that criminals are coming across, sometimes the only crime that they've committed is that
Is coming
they've
across.
yes,
Yeah,
just
it's coming
coming across.
across. Yeah,
And
that's the crime they committed. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I'm sorry, I'm getting kind of animated about this, but it just the other arguments I think are sometimes economical, and I think those are really false as well too. Suzette?
Craig, do you have your hand up for a reason, or did we forget to address you?
Oh, I'm
I do
sorry.
have my hand up to just wanted to talk about something a little bit when it comes to the nature of where some of this rhetoric around immigration kind of arrives from. And I think I mean, Carol, you kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier about how some of what the US has done in the past with messing with other countries has caused chaos and instability in other governmental regimes, which then makes their lives full of chaos and anarchy and violence and drugs and whatnot. And they flee from those areas where we have performed political operations that drove those occurrences. And then these folks come to the US seeking a way out from that. And they are then, demonized in this cycle of our own creation. And, folks, I think more likely on the other side will point to them and go, look at these barbaric countries. We don't want these people from there, but we've created these barbaric situations that they're in. And so there is that. But I also just want to note how consistent and persistent uh, a thorough line of just institutionalized racism there is within the American political system and in so many of our ideologies. And when we look at the more recent era of the last, I want to say, 10 or so years, one thing that has, I think, increased as this modern racist rhetoric has increased is the great replacement theory. I don't know if y'all have heard of that, but basically that is a theory espoused by the other side, largely institutional white supremacist organizations trying to spread the idea that people of color are trying to essentially cause a slow genocide of the white man by bringing in more people of color and slowly fading out the white line. Like that is a failing theory. And I think
heard
even
that
recently was,
yesterday for the
yeah,
first time.
it's very disturbing. It's very disturbing. And the folks who truly believe in this are then trying to, how shall I say, package that idea. Thank you, Crackers. Yes, the false white gospel are trying to package that idea in a palatable way that is not so extreme sounding, shall we say, for folks who may be able to lend them a sympathetic ear, and slowly kind of distributing this like mental disinformation campaign to those folk who may not be as explicitly racist as them, but who may be sympathetic to hearing about that, and then slowly bringing other people into this cause of almost blatantly institutionalized racism. Not almost blatantly. So I think that as we have seen, especially since 2020, or 2016 rather, I should say, this constant disinformation, fake news, like false, like AI generated material, um, just really proliferate its way through social media and things like that. I think that's where we're seeing the most modern incarnation of it come from. But obviously, it definitely has its roots all the way back in American history, where white folks were against white folks, and if you were Polish or if you were, Italian, then you were also,
Irish
looked
or
down
Chinese.
upon. Irish, yeah, exactly. So we have a long, thorough line of constantly demonizing whichever population is in need of that help and is trying to immigrate at the time. But that's our modern version of it, and it's sad. But there you go.
Well,
And
I immigrated to Texas when I was 10 years old, and I moved here. I moved to Texas from Wisconsin, and I shit you not, most of the people, most of the kids that I knew actually thought Wisconsin was in Canada. They had no idea that Wisconsin was in the United States. But I was not welcomed to Texas when I moved here from so far away. And I had a funny voice. I sounded like I was from up north, you know. I sounded like I was from, a different country. I was called Craig the Fag every day at school before I even know what a fag was. And it took me years. It took me years to get through all that and to try to find a reason to like being in Texas. I mean, my father picked up the family from Wisconsin and moved us here, whether we wanted to come or not. And that was as a white male or as a white child coming in, from someplace so different. But what really irritates me and what I just think Americans have no idea what the actual immigration laws are. I started in the 7th grade in school here in Texas, and the 7th grade had one whole year of Texas history, one whole year of nothing but Texas history. And then from then on, never did you get any education on what the immigration laws actually are. And so I hear stuff, I don't, whenever I hear anything on the news, I have no idea, in fact, whether anything I'm hearing is true or not, because I have no idea what the law is, because it's not taught in schools. It's not the law, the actual laws are not discussed, except for when they say, like, supposedly the Republicans and the Democrats in the House or in the Senate had a bill that was updating the immigration laws, but Trump was against it. So he, told all the Republicans to vote no on it. But still, I don't know anything
Yeah.
about what was actually in that bill, you know? And so I think here's an issue where most people just know absolutely nothing about what the law is, and yet people on social media and everything are arguing about it because people just like to argue.
Well,
I like
there,
that one post.
there's so much misinformation about everything. It's so hard to trust what you hear anymore because there's alternative facts. No, there's
which
but like
didn't exist until
like you
2016.
you brought up the book, The False White Gospel, and I just listened to the chapter about the truth shall set you free, and there really is um there there really there are some facts that are facts and one that's not. One of the things that I want to make sure that I address before we get to the end of the call is that the economics of the situation has always been brought up, and long before this current situation. I remember just like when I was early in seminary, so like in the aughts, maybe 2007, or I in my preaching class I heard a really good sermon about the economics of and how how which a fact that I've confirmed recently is that immigrants put in far more into the social security system, into our economy, than they will ever get out. Immigrants, especially those with work permits, but all immigrants pay into the system in one way or the other and cannot benefit from it
Right.
unless they become citizens.
Yeah, I remember well, my parents, when I was a child and still with my parents, but they would say, to be able to get a job here in the United States, and to be able to have a check or a bank account or a license, so you kind of already need basically an ID or something like that. So many illegal immigrants get a fake ID or get a fake social security number, but they start paying their taxes on top of that because that's what they want. They want to be able to assimilate. They want to be able to get a living, have their lives, prosper just like anybody else. And honestly, they also, if when they go to immigration lawyers, they tell them, good, you're paying your taxes because that already shows that you're not being just like, you're just not getting benefits from the federal government. You're paying your taxes, you're paying your share of what you do. And that's what many people don't realize, that there's so many people, immigrants are paying their taxes and yet they cannot benefit from everything that they're contributing to.
Yes, I even have some numbers here if you're interested. Undocumented immigrants paid $97 billion in taxes in 2022. They paid higher state local tax rates than the top 1% in all the states, and contributed 26 billion to Social Security, which they cannot benefit from. So
That's right.
the reason I remembered that being like back in what the time frame is that I remember there was an email circulating at the time about something like immigrants are gonna take your grandma's social security, you know, and all of that, and so I wrote this big thoughtful email and sent it out to like my family and stuff, saying, this is why this is not true, da da da. And like a month or two later, my mother forwarded that same email. Immigrants are going to take your granny social security. And I was just like, oh my gosh, Mom, did you not even read that email? Maybe she was getting dementia back then and I didn't realize it. But anyway, I just remember that just irritating me so much. But I think that's one of the things that we can do. I mean, of course, it's really important to just get out the vote. I think that's one of the biggest things. It is just to make our voices heard. but to do things like that, to speak up when these untruths are brought up, just speaking up. And I think there are opportunities like that group, the Samaritans, to contribute to very boots on the ground kind of activities. But I mean, there's all kinds of ways that we can make a difference. And I think you've brought up some very good points about why we why we want to do this, and why this is important for our country. And Krager, thank you for bringing up the book that's being talked about on in the Wednesday night group, and that's an excellent book too.
Well,
What
I've
is
been
that
in
book
Texas.
again, Krager?
It's called The False White Gospel.
Okay.
It's a must read, Lynn, especially
Yeah, I want to get it. That's
uh,
that's why I'm
in
okay.
this
The false
election
white gospel.
year. I
Got
think
it.
this is the most important book I've read in the last several years. Because really, it talks about this false white gospel. When you get right down to it, it's based on racism. And this book is scary, but it brings a truth into awareness that we really need to imbibe, and we need to deal with it. For those that have the courage to read this or listen to it.
How
But the
old
other
is
thing
that
I would
book?
say, huh?
How old is that book? Is it how
It's from
recent?
2024. It's new. I've lived here in Texas for over 50 years. Not once. I have never had one person ever tell me that they lost their job because an immigrant took their job away from them. Not one time. Not once have I ever heard another white person or any other person, no matter, of any color, have ever complained that an immigrant took their job. Never. And
I
so
would like to, I would like to say, be in the room with these people. Don't think of them as faceless, nameless immigrants. But if you were in a room full of 20 starving little children and you had food and you'd said, only my kids can have this food, could you really be that person? Like, think of it in a real application of, where's your humanity? Where is it? So to me, I think it's humanizing those people. I think we've done a terrible job at doing that.
I agree. Well, where do you think God is in all this?
I think it's clear. I think it's back in Leviticus. I think
Right.
the message was given to us
Right.
thousands of years ago.
Thousands of years ago. Right.
Yeah,
the funny thing is that when you read the false white gospel, the people on the other side think God is with them too, just as much that we think God is with us. And that's why it's so dangerous. But I always come back to my thing is, you know what I'm hearing, if it doesn't sound like love, if it don't sound like love, then it don't sound like Jesus to me.
exactly.
Jesus said, to what you have done to the least of these, you have also done to me. Now that's a loving thing to say. This is not what I'm hearing.
Right.
So, yeah, it's really hard for me to comprehend that. I think a lot of what we talk about here in God Talk is about who is God to us, and it's incomprehensible to me that somebody could take a racist stance and say God is on my side. How can that be? How can that be? That is a God that I don't know. That is not a God of love.
It's ego, which I tend to think means edge God out. So whenever a person's ego gets the best of them, they are edging God out.
I love that, man.
My favorite saying is, you will never meet another human being who is not made in God's image. Go back to Genesis and see how man was created. That means that you're never going to meet another human being who's not made in God's image. And if God is love, then I got to love him. That's
Amen.
just it.
God is love. Let's just keep that in front of us, and we can at least start from that point of knowing who God is for us, and sharing that with people when we get a chance, by our actions or by our words, or by our vote, however we can do it. So that's I think a good place to
What's
end.
really interesting to me is the situation we're in right now is, have we reached a tipping point yet to where this country can actually install Kamala Harris as the first, not only the first female, but the first female of color in the presidency? Have we grown enough as a people in this country to where we're going to be able to make this happen? Or are we going to go back to, Ronald Reagan, let's make America great again? Trump just stole that from Ronald Reagan, and no one even remembers that except me. Maybe
Oh,
Lynn does.
And me. And me.
But, so I'm sure that there's a lot of my friends have a tremendous amount of anxiety over this, because we know what going backward is going to mean to a lot of us. And
Yeah,
so,
because Project 2025 is no joke.
yeah,
people. It is no joke. And it doesn't bode well for any of the other, if President 45 should win again. I think that there is hope, because as a Black person who's lives to age 72 in this country, attended segregated schools, this is the first time in my lifetime that we are openly discussing racism as a country. I mean, I know, was it Bill Clinton apologized, for segregation or whatever, but you're now hearing people talk about it openly and calling it racist. They're talking about what racism is. And before, racism was always there, but nobody talked about it.
Yeah.
Just kind of, okay, well, if I don't say anything, maybe it'll go away. But now as a country, we are beginning to openly talk about it. I mean, look at this group. Look at us. We're talking. We're using the word.
Yes, and I
And
hope
I'm old enough to remember where the word,
yeah.
it wasn't used. So
Thank you for that word of hope. Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you. And I know that this was a lot to talk about, and I hope everybody got a chance to say what they wanted to. And if not, we'll try to pick it back up next week. And I'll try to do some of that research and get back with you on some of the things that I said I would. So, anything else pressing before we close out? Kreger, would you pray us out?
Absolutely. Holy Spirit, we are grateful again for another episode of God Talk. It's always so interesting, all these perspectives, and what we hear. I think what we hear in this room at the end of the day is the voice of love. Everyone makes comments that are well thought out and seem to be based in the position of Christ in the least of these logic. And so we're just so grateful for all of that. We just hope that as this community that's in this room right now, that somehow we'll be able to do something between now and November to help get a vote out, change someone's mind maybe, or get someone registered or something, like Suzette was saying, something, as Michelle Obama was saying, do something. So God, we ask that we be your hands and feet on the ground, and we can't wait to come back together next week for another session. And we just thank you for all the love in this room. And we pray all of these things, ask these in the name of He who was trying to teach us all this stuff in the first place, and that is Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Amen.
Amen.
Next week, I think we'll probably talk a little bit about like book banning and some related subjects that have been happening in Texas as well as other places. So
I want to talk
So-
about chocolate cake, something easy. Because I can't.
That's a controversial topic, Craig. I don't know.
We
I don't
have
know,
in on that.
Craig. I don't know.
Hot
I don't
chocolate.
know.
So I don't know. That might be controversial too.
Love y'all. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Uh,
Bye.